Hello, my name is Lewis Tyler, Managing Editor of International Fire and Safety Journal and Fire Safety Journal Americas. Delighted to be here at FSE on the Global HSE stand. Delighted also to be joined by Keith Plowman, Fire Safety Consultant. Keith, thanks for having us on the stand today. Obviously it's been really busy.
Really busy, yeah.
What are you showing at the show?
So we're basically showcasing all the global HSE product offerings. We'd like to particularly focus on the external wall, which we've got here, and our ceasefire door, which maybe just be out of shot, but just behind me here. But we are obviously exhibiting all our fire safety, passive fire, and fire engineering services as well.
No, you mentioned this bit of kit here.
Yep.
Obviously this has been a bit of a, I came onto the stand yesterday, everyone was really excited about this. So can you just explain what it is, what it does, and why it's kind of needed in the industry?
So obviously we're within the industry at the moment. PAS 9980, FRAW, fire risk appraisal, external wall assessments are very much in vogue at the minute, sort of cladding assessments, to put it in sort of layman's terms. What we've got here is a typical sort of demonstration of a cross-section of wall. So we're standing effectively outside on the scaffolding at the moment, looking in, and we would have a flat on the other side of this. So it shows what we would typically find when we're assessing a wall in terms of its fire risk.
And then in terms, we discussed earlier, in an interview in the magazine, SBA in Scotland, the regulations, slightly different to what we have in the rest of the UK. So if you don't mind just trying to explain, SBA and how it works.
Yeah, so the SBA is a Scottish doctrine, so it stands for Single Building Assessment, and what that does is it takes an FRAW, so an external wall assessment, combines it with a fire risk assessment, and then provides a holistic risk assessment over the top of that. So it's combining some quite well industry established workflows and methodologies into a single output that the Scottish Government then use for an appraisal of the building.
So it really is all about improving clarity within that regulation, something that we're not necessarily seeing in the rest of the UK. Is that something that you want to see?
Yeah, so I think the interesting bit about the UK specifically is the devolved governments and the legislation which kind of goes along with that. So I think you have a bit of a disjointed approach in England. So the FRA and the FRAW are still separate outputs. They're not necessarily conducted together with that single overall holistic assessment. The difference is in Scotland, they combine them into a single output, and that gives you a much better understanding of risk within your building. Which is great if you're a building manager or a housing association to get that overall picture of your stock and the condition that it's in. And that, I think, that clarity is what's missing in England in particular.
So in terms of PAS 9980, it brings up some challenges. Are you as a company really seeing consistent interpretation across the board?
The short answer is no. Because we deliver them ourselves as a business, and we are also involved in projects where we're reviewing others' work as well. So with any risk assessment, there is a difference of opinion in terms of risk weighting. So what I would consider very risky, you might not consider particularly risky. And sometimes, although the PAS tries to address that through its methodology, sometimes there is weightings that's applied by the individual assessors, and you do have to sometimes take that interpretation into account when you're going through it. Generally speaking, what I find more riskier than another assessor, typically that would balance out in another area. So broadly speaking, the overall assessment is the same. It's more the nuance of it that we find the inconsistencies.
And then just off camera, we were discussing, how PAS 9980 and EWS1 forms. How has PAS really impacted EWS1?
So PAS provides the consistent methodology for the assessment. The output of that is the FRAW reports. As the industry is becoming more accepting, more understanding of wall build-ups, the level of risk that these particular wall build-ups pose, the EWS1 form, while it is still relevant, is becoming less relevant because the industry as a whole is more upskilled. The financial institutions typically would engage with fire engineers to have an appraisal of that FRAW report itself. Therefore, there's less weighting that's applied to the EWS1, which was only ever really designed as a shortcut for the lenders to understand how risky the building is and whether it could be lent against.
So final question from me, and look, I've worked with you guys a few times now. I know you're very diligent in the way you kind of work with the customers. So how are they finding the industry? What challenges are they having to navigate?
So information is probably the biggest area. You know, we have within England, specifically the HRB regime, we've got the golden thread of information. So what we find is in newer building projects, there's a whole wealth of information, as-built drawings, designs, all that sort of stuff. But what lacks is the actual as-installed pictures and evidence, which we would need to do a fire risk appraisal of a wall system. So we're finding the volume and the level of information is typically on the two extremes. Either there is very little information or there's a whole wealth of information, but it's not necessarily the right kind of information. That's why we've got the model that we brought here to sort of showcase the things that we're looking at when we do a wall inspection, what we're reporting on, why we're reporting on that, and how that is factored into the overall risk assessment of that wall system.
I know I said that was the final one, but I think it is worth just asking that, you know, your stand's been so busy yesterday, today, and I'm assuming it's going to be the same tomorrow. What's the feedback been like on this particularly?
So in general, quite good. I say that as one of the engineers that helped put this together. But no, it's really positive. It is good to see the engagement it has. We had a few local authority fire services approach us yesterday to sort of comment that they very rarely see a wall in this kind of state, and it would be useful to get a bit more information and understanding of it. And I think that is arguably industry professionals, and I think unless you're installing these day to day as part of your job, you don't see walls in this build-up very often. You normally see a nice, pretty sort of clad wall system, and that's how you would engage with it. I think this really sort of throws into focus the sort of things that we're looking at and how important they are in protecting your building with your asset from fire.
And something that's obviously needed in the industry. Keith, thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much.